So I've been using Anchor for over a year now, and it's one of the easiest ways to make a podcast. It's free, and there are creation tools that allow you to record and edit podcasts right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership if you want to or wish to. And it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. And if you want to make a podcast, you can go to anchor.fm to get started. And it is very easy to do to make a podcast on there. And you have unlimited data memory on there as well. I would recommend using Anchor to make a podcast. Hi, I am Jennifer Purcell, and welcome to my podcast, Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge, where we will discuss, discover, and learn more about the challenges and triumphs of those with NLD and other learning challenges. I do have a website for this podcast, and it is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter account for the podcast. They are all under the same name, which is Living with NLD. I also have a YouTube channel for the podcast, which can be found by Googling the title of the podcast, which is Living with an Invisible Learning Challenge. I would like to tell you about a nonprofit that I use for my research for this podcast. It is called the NLD Project, and I use their blog for my research. They are a nonprofit that is based in New York and is trying to get NVLD back on the DSM, and they provide many resources for people with NVLD on their website. I'll provide you with the website for them in the podcast description. All proceeds from the ads on this podcast will be donated towards the NVLD project. Please feel free to explore the other topics on the podcast, and hopefully you will learn something new from them. I hope you enjoy today's episodes. To access the testimonials, there are two ways. There's a testimonial page with the full quotes, and then there is a slideshow on the home page with excerpts of the longer ones and the short ones. On the last image of the testimonial quote with Julia's quote, you can click on it and it will take you to the testimonial page where it shows you all of them with the full quoted testimonials. I did it that way because I wanted it to be easier to read on the home page, since some of them were a little longer than a testimonial usually is. And then I wanted to make sure that you could see the whole testimonial on the testimonial page. So I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, you can email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com, and I will try to show you how to access it. Thank you. Hope you're having a good weekend. Bye. Good morning. So the next Facebook chat for my podcast audience members who have NVLD or know somebody who has NVLD and wants to support them more will be November 20th, which is the third Saturday of the month, and will be at 10 a.m. specific time zone. And this is basically, well, not basically, it is a safe space for you to talk about whatever you want. It doesn't have to be about NLD, but it can be. And there's confidentiality, and nothing will be shared outside of the group unless you have that person's permission to share it outside of the group with somebody else. And it's a pretty small group, usually with about 4 or 5 people. And we meet from 10 a.m. to 11:30 usually. in Pacific time zone on Facebook. So if you want to come, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com or message me at livingwithnld on Facebook or Instagram. Thank you. And Twitter. I hope to see you on November 20th. Okay, so today's episode will be about how to describe how you feel and emotions when you have NLD. Have you ever had a difficult time describing your emotions to your friends and your family? Have you ever not been able to find the words to describe your emotions and had to rely on your family or friend to supply feelings that might fit your moods or emotions? I have found myself in all of these situations before. NVLDers or people who have NVLD can have difficulties with expressing our emotions because sometimes we lack the words to describe our emotions when we need them the most. This happens to me quite often. Like, I don't know why I'm crying so much over something little. It's probably because people with NVLD tend to make things bigger than they need to be. I think that's connected to our minds being more literal than people who are neurotypical and going to the extreme of things. I think we tend to exaggerate the scale or weight of things because we're tired of not having enough attention on us or other NDLDers. And we're wanting more because we need help but don't know how to always properly ask for it. Like like we may cry a lot, be very quiet, or say, I love you repeatedly when we want something, but don't know how to ask for it directly. I think I've done all of those, especially the last one. We probably do this to try to advocate for ourselves and follow NVLDers because we feel like we don't get enough advocacy. Here are some songs that can help you feel loved and help you express emotions. Beloved by Jordan Felice, Walking Miracles by Matthew West, Now by Mallory Hope, Feel Alright by Guy Sebastian, Oliver Nelson, and Stinger. Also, Treading Water by Chris Califadar, and Grace Winds by Matthew West, Unwell by Matchbox 20, and Invisible by Hunter Hayes. Here's an article from NLD on the web, and it is titled Misunderstood Child, The Child with a Nonverbal Learning Disorder by Liza Little, who has a psychology degree and is an RN. Says that, quote, in addition, children with NLD may be treated for tantrums, problem solving, contextualizing, and coping with emotions, end quote. I can relate to this quote above because I have had to learn how to cope with my emotions as I've become more accustomed to expressing them. I've had to become comfortable with the different levels of my emotions and realize that it's okay to cry and be mad when needed. Also, I've learned that you should express what you're feeling or need to talk about more rather than holding it in because you may get a different response than you thought you would. Like, for example, that's why I share with you guys when I'm having a bad day and I have a migraine and I'm nauseous or something, because you might be wondering why I'm having a hard time with the podcast and why it sounds choppy and weird and not so smooth. And it might seem like I share that in every episode, but that's because my migraines are chronic and I usually have them every day. So it's just a part of my life, and some people with NLD do have migraines. So it, I think it's connected to that. But anyways, here's another article from the NLD project titled "Expressing Your Needs and Feelings" by Elieen, who will always think the world of my speech therapist. Of her speech therapist. Quote, "Thankfully, one day I just had a meltdown and let all my feelings come out. What a relief this was. I felt so much better. Those around me now understood me better and were able to support me. And moving forward, I was more willing to talk about my frustrations when I had them, which allowed me to really see how hard I actually work and how much I can accomplish. Little did I know how big this day was for my future. I now started to learn that it was critical to my success to be able to talk to those around me about how I was feeling and what I needed so I could keep the focus on the tasks at hand." End quote. I can also relate to this quote because I know what it's like to have emotional meltdowns, especially one that is related to holding in feelings or NLD challenges. My last one was about being unexpectedly ghosted by one of my friends or who I thought was a friend. This taught me to realize who are my friends and who aren't. Also, not that everyone is supposed to stay in my life, and the ones who are supposed to leave it. I did an art not article. I did an episode about that on this podcast with the ghosting, and had neurotypicals and NLDers contribute to that episode, and I think it came out quite well. Excuse me. And it was one of the most involved episodes I've done on this podcast because I had, I think, 13 people contribute to it. Both neurotypicals and NLDers contributed. And I did that because ghosting is a thing that both neurotypicals and NLDers experience. And I wanted to show that. And I wanted to show that it happens to more neurodiverse people than you think it would. And yeah, so, and that was a recent episode, so you can find it on the website if you want to go listen to it. Here's another article titled "The Invisible Disability." Quote, "Serious emotional problems. When parents, teachers, and specialists misunderstand the deficits associated with NVLD, it can lead to depression, anxiety, and phobias. Adults place a lot of pressure on their little professors to perform. Students with NVLD want to please others and become anxious when they cannot do what they're expected of them. They have no idea why they often annoy others. Adults may see their behavior as a deliberate plan to gain attention without understanding that these children's right brain deficits prevent them from comprehending social expectations. Some students with NVLD are seen as openly defiant and are placed in classrooms for children with emotional and behavioral disorders. But NVLD is not the same as emotional disorder behavior management. Therapies are not the remedial services these students need. End quote. This quote brings up a very good point that if parents minimize NLD and say something like, it's an excuse for you to be stupid. That discounts it as a learning challenge and that isn't a big deal. Let me tell you, as a fellow NVLer, if you've heard this from a parent, friend, sibling, or someone else, the hell with them. None of that is true. What they're saying is bullcrap. Sorry about my language there, but I think it's necessary. Anyone who minimizes any learning challenge doesn't know what it is like to live with it and hasn't done enough research to understand the severity it can have on someone's life. I would say this goes for physical challenges as well. People with NVLD may be defiant because they get dismissed too much when they're at home or surrounded by ones that should care about and support them the most. Not every NVLDer has a supportive family or friends as I do, and I've tried to showcase some of those people in the interviews on this podcast. I know I have been this way when I felt like the sexual abuse I experienced was being minimized by basically half of my extended family. Sorry, that sentence didn't make sense when I said that. What I'm trying to say is have felt this when half of my extended family minimized my sexual abuse that I experienced my family. I was standing for what happened to me and my story. Also for my emotions being behind it being real and valid. I didn't want anyone dismissing what I had been through or experienced. I talk about that experience because it's similar to minimizing NLD and its severity. I know when I experienced the abuse, I suppressed all my emotions, both positive and negative, because I didn't want anyone to know what was going on. I also didn't know that it was wrong, which is why I thought it was okay to suppress my emotions. If you want to know more about this experience, go listen to episode 20 on this podcast. And another thing about expressing emotions, it's good to let them out, not just by talking to people, but you could talk to yourself about it, or you could, journal about it and get it out that way too. And that is a good way to do that because it will let you have a healthier life and be able to, like I was saying, not feel so bottled up and have your emotions be so bunched up inside you all the time. And I know that people with autism have a challenge with this too, and ADHD, I believe, as well. And it's it's not easy expressing emotions, and it's not easy having the words to describe them all the time, especially if you lack the vocabulary to describe them and being able to know how you're feeling and to be able to describe it. And if you need somebody to help you describe your emotions, that's okay. Just don't um, don't let them put words in your mouth because sometimes they can do that, and then you can think they're describing something that's accurate when it may not be. Um, but sometimes it is accurate. So, you know, let it, the people that know you the most, like your parents and really close friends or siblings, help you because they'll be able to provide accurate answers because they'll know you inside and out and maybe better than you know yourselves. At least that's been what I've been able to experience. So, as I wrap up today, I would like for you to know that there are still people out there with NBLD who have issues with expressing emotions, controlling feelings, and finding the words to describe them. I would like to hear from my audience about your challenges in these areas of expressing emotions, coping with them, describing them, and controlling them. Please comment on the episode on livingwithnld.com or YouTube or Spotify. You do not have to have NBLD to comment on the episode. Or if you do not want to comment on the episode, you can email me if you feel like that's a more private way to communicate. My email is livingwithnld@gmail.com. I hope you learned something new today and enjoyed the episode. Talk to you next Friday. Bye. As I wrap up, there are some things I would like to share with you. I do have a website for this podcast. It is called livingwithnld.com. I also have a Facebook and Instagram page for this podcast. It is called Living with NLD. I will include the links for those in the description. In conclusion, I would like to hear from my audience. If you know individuals with NLD that I could interview for this podcast, please email me at livingwithnld@gmail.com. What are you interested in learning about NLD? I know I'm not an expert, but I do know I have the living experience of having it. I would like you to practice journaling about your gifts and differences. Also, see if there is a way that you can make that difference become easier for you to do than it originally was. Thank you for listening today, and please go to my YouTube channel and subscribe to it. Thank you. Bye.